Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Nishcast. I am the Diggly Doodah Doc, the Papatoetoe Panther. We had two Papatoetoe Panthers in the Aotearoa Kiwis team against Tonga, which was pretty damn cool. We are here for the Nishcast with the wildcard to talk through Aotearoa Kiwis versus Tonga and any other rugby league matters that the wildcard wants to throw at me. You know the deal by now. Support the Niche Case as best you can. Anyway, which way you want to do that, whether it's on YouTube, iTunes, Patreon, the best way to support the Niche Case, sponsor the Niche Cast. However you want to get the good vibes flowing, hi to Mike, and we appreciate it. And wildcard, before we get into these rugby league matters, yesterday in the Black Caps episode of the Niche Cast, we introduced the podcast talking about Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets. The other bloke in the NBA is Steven Adams. There's been a bit of talk around Steven Adams at the moment about a trade possibility. So I hope you're doing well on this beautiful Monday. And I just want to get your thoughts on the trade market, the trade situation with Steven Adams, and perhaps a little bit of advice for our Kiwi listeners on how to feel about the situation.
How to feel about the situation? Well, I mean, this is a bit of a tricky one because I think a lot of people in New Zealand are Oklahoma City Thunder fans because of Steven Adams. So, you know, if you get wrapped up in that whole thing, you're in a bit of a compromised situation there. For somebody like myself, who is a Dallas Mavericks fan at a time when the Dallas Mavericks need a center and Steven Adams might be available, see, this is nothing to feel upset about at all. This is kind of amazing, although I think the Mavs have probably spent all their bargaining chips at this point, more likely looking for free agency. But, you know, quite a few teams out there would be interested in a dude who can be a genuine starting center in this league, albeit a fairly expensive one, so maybe we're looking at a team with more young players. But what I will say is that compared to some of the dumb trade rumors in the past, this one is actually fairly legitimate because the source that came out with this wasn't just Bill Simmons just like spitting off the top of the dome on his podcast. This was like it was a Sports Illustrated writer who was saying like, look, OKC haven't been the team they wanted to be in this incarnation. They're committed to Russell Westbrook and Paul George, but if they're not going to be winning first round playoff series, then trading one of their more expensive other fellas is a legit possibility because we're talking about a small market team here, Oklahoma City. It's not exactly Los Angeles. It's not exactly New York. So competing for them is a little bit, it's not that much harder because of the way the salary cap works, the way you have the draft system and all this. It's not like small market teams are out of the picture, but these are circumstances they have to take into account when looking at the financials, and they are well over the luxury tax right now. And trading Steven Adams wouldn't even bring them under the luxury tax. Trading Dennis Schroeder wouldn't bring them under the luxury tax. I think trading both of them might. Andre Robertson is the other one who was mentioned in that trio of possible tradees. And right now, I mean, the luxury tax is the thing with the luxury tax is that you're paying double back in tax to the league for every dollar that you go over the top. So you're basically paying triple the salary if you're that far over. So it's not just a matter of getting under the luxury tax. They might be fine to pay some luxury tax, but just not as much. Like if you can cut Dennis Schroeder's roughly $15 million a year next season off the books, then you're probably saving a further $30 million on top of that. So like that just makes financial sense in its own. I will say I think Dennis Schroeder is far more likely to be traded. In fact, I think he will be traded by the Thunder. Steven Adams would be one they would do very reluctantly because of how important he is to sort of like the culture of that team, how much they appreciate all the stuff he's done for them in the past. However, it's basketball, isn't it? It's big business, and if it comes down to it, they wouldn't hesitate if they got the right package in return. So, I mean, take it seriously. Sam Presti was asked about it, the GM of the Thunder. It was asked about whether these reports are accurate or not. He didn't name any names or anything. He didn't mention any players, but he did say, look, the financial part of this whole business is a big part of it. and it is important, and we can't afford to be paying way over the top for a team that isn't performing at that level. Like, if you're paying that far over the luxury tax, that's like LeBron James Miami Heat kind of level. Like, okay, we'll do this if we're competing for championships. If you're not competing for championships, then anything's possible. Anyone is on the trade block outside of, those two star players who would change the absolute course of the franchise, and Paul George and Russell Westbrook. So I don't know, is that covering all the feelings and stuff, Doc? Am I getting somewhere with that? It's a tricky situation. I'll probably have to write about it in the next day or two, I think.
Comprehensive as always, Wildcard.
Lovely.
How are you feeling about the Kiwis' kind of journey they've been on under Michael Maguire? The Kiwis defeated Tonga 34-14. Fairly solid display from the Kiwis on the back of a fairly solid display against Australia at the same ground, Mount Smart, late last year. They had a fairly solid tour to England in which they understandably lost the series by losing the first two games, but then they did manage to build together towards the third game with an impressive performance in that third and final game of their series. All signs are pretty good that Michael Maguire's had a huge impact on the Kiwis setup. So just how are you kind of viewing the bigger picture journey of the past? It was pretty much a year since they played that Denver test against England to kickstart this whole journey under Michael Maguire. So how are you just feeling about the whole bigger picture situation here for the Kiwis?
Well, bigger picture, they're definitely the last couple times Maguire's had a squad in camp. I mean, it hasn't exactly been a full strength squad all the time. There's end of year ones are always a little compromised. The Denver test was a bit of just a weird one for a number of reasons, and they certainly weren't great in that one. But all of this has to be taken into the context of building from what was an absolute rock bottom on-field performance in the World Cup before that. So from that point of view, yeah, I mean, certainly things are chugging along pretty nicely since then, and they're getting to the point where they're getting back to the Kiwis that we would expect, which is not above and beyond. I didn't think that performance against Tonga was massively ground-shakingly impressive. It was just doing the business, which is great to see, because against this exact same opposition a couple years ago, they were not able to do that. So pretty pleased on the overall thing. I mean, it's great to have these occasions. I think having that standalone sort of rep week that they did there was a good idea. But yeah, it seems to be building nicely towards something positive. Am I on the right track there? You're obviously much closer involved than I am.
Yeah, and everyone just seems happy. Everyone's happy to be involved in camps. Everyone's happy to be together. They make that very known that they enjoy coming into camps, and you've got a situation where a lot of the players in the camp now are very eager to talk about how proud they are to put on the black jersey to represent New Zealand, which has to be viewed as a reactionary comment to a lot of the eligibility and player movement away from New Zealand. So I don't think it's that these younger players are so filled with pride to play for New Zealand. Well, I think they are, but I think that's just they're overstating that pride and mana in the Kiwis jersey to make up for the perceived lack of pride and mana in the Kiwis jersey. And it's just very interesting that Michael Maguire's come in as a Australian, and I think football-wise he's had a significant impact, and he's a significantly better coach than David Kidwell. But when David Kidwell was hired as Kiwis coach, the whole thing was he's I don't know if he's a legend, but he's a quote-unquote Kiwis legend. He knows what it's all about. This is what the whole thing around David Kidwell was the cultural implications of having a player like David Kidwell as the coach of the Kiwis. But it's been Michael Maguire who has done a far better job in that cultural, spiritual, mana elements of representing New Zealand in rugby league, which is a weird little situation.
Yeah, it's a weird little situation considering what we were talking about on one of the other podcasts a couple of days ago, the football one, about how the All Whites need to recover this kind of thing. And we were saying, like, the reason you got to do, like, the way to do this is to hire someone who understands New Zealand football and get someone who's like an actually involved on ground level with Kiwi footballers, and as opposed to, you know, hiring someone from overseas, whereas the Kiwis have gone around it the other way. They've come at it from the other way around. So, I mean, but it's not always like, that's not always the thing though, is it? It doesn't have to be like, if you're trying to do something, I guess Kidwell tried to maybe manufacture something that should have come naturally, perhaps is the way to put it. I'm not sure.
Whether that is a product of him just being a mediocre coach.
It probably is, to be honest, actually.
So
like, you lose that aura about you, don't you, when people aren't taking you seriously.
Well, I think it's more a case of being a sports coach, as we've said on those previous podcasts. And you look at Wayne Bennett, the personal relationships is as important, if not more important, than what you're bringing to the table tactically and technically. So in that regard, Michael Maguire is clearly a better coach because he's brought together professional rugby league players and he has built that culture. And building that culture is part of a coach's job. So I think it's just a sign of the difference in quality between the two coaches in all regards, whether it's working with players, whether it's building something, whether it's technically, and personnel-wise. I think Michael Maguire's just doing a great job all round, and they're always talking about the bigger journey. They're always talking about something bigger than this game, which is something that's appeared in a lot of interviews. So I think it's just stay tuned with how the Kiwis are travelling. Big winner, Brandon Smith. He was fantastic at hooker. There are a couple other interesting performances. Obviously, like, this is kind of reflective of how I look at the Kiwis in that game. Sean Johnson was the star of the show, three tries, but Brandon Smith was the star of the show, darting out a dummy half every which way. He was amazing. They both need a platform to work upon, and the Kiwis forward pack presented Sean Johnson with the opportunities. The Kiwis forward pack presented Brandon Smith with all those opportunities to run out of dummy half. That's the key point for me, is that we can't celebrate Sean Johnson without celebrating the forward pack. We can't celebrate Brandon Smith without celebrating the forward pack. And a lot of people don't want to celebrate Jared Whitehair-Hargreaves. A lot of people don't want to celebrate Kenny Bromwich on an edge, who's always fantastic. A lot of people tend to overlook Jesse Bromwich as being the best prop in the game. Isaac Liu never gets talked about, but he shows up every week for the Premiership winning Roosters and does a fantastic job. Britton Nakota's in his debut season, he's just making NRL footy look easy, let alone the guys off the bench, Leeson Armau, Nelson Asafa-Solomona and James Fisher-Harris, who all did their jobs as well. So it was the Kiwis forward pack that presented all the opportunities, and they did so against the far more celebrated, the sexier, the more headline status Tongan forward pack, which is a product of the environment Michael Maguire has set up. So I say all that to say that, you know, there's Sean Johnson, there's Brandon Smith that everyone's going to talk about, but did any other players for you, Wildcard, stand out as just standout performers in a variety of different ways?
Well, in the variety of different ways, point of view, Benji Marshall, yeah, you know, a few lovely little tears during the anthem, and a nice interview afterwards with his kid there, and like just seeing, he actually didn't have much of a game. Like, he did a bit of kicking, but he didn't. Did he run the ball once? He might have only run the ball once. Like, he didn't have a lot to do. Tended to be Sean Johnson, which very understandably when Sean Johnson was running at, you know, John Asiata in the other half. So fair play there. But just having Benji back for all the other reasons, like having Benji back because he hadn't played for so long, and although, like, what was it, something like, was it 7 years or something stupid since he last played for the Kiwis? And I think they said the last time he played was the first the debut international test for Sean Johnson, which is crazy to think about. Just having Benji back there, because he should have been picked so many times in between then, and it's been a talking point for us before, like, why not just pick even at the World Cup, like, why not just pick the steady hand of Benji, the experience, even if he's just a squad player, and just seeing, like, all that about some of the younger guys talking about how much it means to them. I think this didn't mean anything more to anyone possibly than it meant to Benji Marshall, because I think he really, really embraced that opportunity just to, put on the Kiwis jersey potentially one last time, but certainly, for those 80 minutes, I think he really lived it up, and the whole camp around it and everything. I love seeing that. I love seeing Benji get nice things because he deserves them. One of the all-time legends of New Zealand Rugby League, and former St George Dragon as well. So shout out to Benji Marshall.
Big it up to the Matua Benji.
Good old Benji.
Just a quick question before I get on to a couple of Papatoetoe Panthers. What is your best Kiwis halves combination? Because Benji Marshall could play in the halves. He could be the best option. Whether that's a long-term solution is a different matter, because he'll either retire at the end of this season. There was talk that him and Robbie Farah may play another season with the Tigers. So, but that's probably a sketchy topic. It's just whether Kieran Foran comes in, or maybe because Cody Nikarima was the half last year alongside Sean Johnson. Jerome Hughes has shown that he can do a great job for the Melbourne Storm in the halves. You're going to have Dylan Brown coming back into footy with the Parramatta Eels as well. It was great to start the season with the Eels, and he's had a long-term back injury, so he's just coming back into the mix now. So suddenly we've got numerous Kiwis halves options. What's your top tier Kiwis halves combination, Wildcat?
I mean, the trick there is that I don't know if there's a top tier is the problem. I'm not sure if there's, like, the fact it's a debate is because no one stands out far and away above everyone else. Sean Johnson's had some injuries and has been a bit of a lightning bolt for criticism at times. Some of it deserved, most of it undeserved, I think. Benji Marshall, end of his career. Dylan Brown, start of his career. Cody Nikarima, a little bit unproven. And certainly, like, if you're comparing him to Sean Johnson, he's probably quite a similar player. I don't think you'd necessarily want those two in the same team, and Sean Johnson probably gets the edge there. So it's a little bit of a tricky one. I guess it all depends on whether, like, how well Kieran Foran happens to be playing and what he's up to, because he is a guy who offers just something a little bit different, a little bit sturdier than the other options. So I think I would lean, like, for a test against Australia next weekend, I think I would lean towards Johnson and Foran, but I wouldn't necessarily say that confidently.
It's a very interesting narrative to keep an eye on, because Kieran Foran looked absolutely chuffed. He looked like everything, because I just stayed in touch with all the photos, the video, the content coming out of the camp. Kieran Foran looked as happy, if not happier, than Benji Marshall to be in Kiwis camp. And I totally agree. Like, Kieran Foran and Cody Nikarima are probably on level pegging at the moment, because neither of them is really playing great footy for their respective teams in the NRL. But I'm very open to a future, and we've been robbed of it because of Kieran Foran's, like, whole career situation. Prior to that, like you mentioned, Sean Johnson playing alongside Benji Marshall. We were meant to have Sean Johnson and Kieran Foran in the halves for like 10 years. That was meant to be the situation. That
Including
was like,
1 year at the Warriors.
It was like, holy shit, these two, we've never had this. We've never, ever had a halves combination. Like, even when Benji Marshall was playing, he was playing, Stacey Jones had fill-in guys. Benji Marshall's had fill-in guys. There's been crossover with Kieran Foran and Benji Marshall and Sean Johnson, but we just haven't had the consistent Johnson and Foran combination. And I think we may get it over the next 5 years, and it's very exciting that under Michael Maguire, if Kieran Foran and Sean Johnson can string games together, and then you have Dylan Brown, you got Cody Nikarima waiting in the wings to play in the halves, Jerome Hughes as well. A little bit of insight, I think, with that Jerome Hughes roll off the bench and Brandon Smith playing at hooker, I think you might see Cody Nikarima step back into that bench utility role if Foran does play in the halves. And then Jerome Hughes goes back to being a depth player because Cody Nikorima's best work has always been in that bench utility role coming on at hooker. Did it for the Brisbane Broncos. He was great at it for the Kiwis as well, very fast out of dummy half. And if you're working with Brandon Smith starting the game, playing 60 minutes, Cody Nikorima coming off the bench, whew, very exciting. But that is because you got the Foran-Johnson combination. I just hope that we get a couple of good years out of Johnson and Foran leading into the World Cup. Papatoetoe Panthers wildcard, we'll finish it here because we'll touch on Tonga, sorry. The Kimamalo, routinely known as the best winger in the world. We talked about him in the previous episode, so I don't know if we want to touch on there, but Leeson Mau's a very interesting player for me, and you became fond with Leeson Mau during his time at the Dragons. Former Papatoetoe Panther. And he had, so this Kiwis bench was pretty damn solid. Nelson Sof-Solomona, he came on for 12 runs, 125 metres. So that's over 10 metres per run. He was at his bulldozing best. Important note here as well that Nelson Sof-Solomona and Kimamalo are cousins. So it's nice to see them in the same Kiwis team. Like that's a pretty big honour for their family, or aiga. Leeson Mau came off the bench. He had 6 runs for 72 metres. I can't do the math off the top of my head, but that is arguably
12 per carry.
Yeah, that could be. Kimamalo had 12 runs for 139 metres, so that's up in that 11-12 metre run per run mark as well. But Leeson Mau, that's as efficient as you get coming off the bench. He only played 33 minutes, so Sofa-Solomona had 44 minutes, so 10 more minutes, which gave him double the minutes, double the carries. Simple solution there. Leeson Mau was incredibly efficient with his stuff, as they say in baseball. I don't know how Leeson Mau does it. He's not overly big. He's got good footwork, but he's not a excessively mobile middle forward. But he's very difficult to tackle. I think there was one Warriors game where he came off the bench and no one could sit him on his ass. He was just standing in every single tackle and playing the ball. So what do you make of Leeson Mau? He's similar to that Lockie Ferguson type of player that we talked about in the Black Caps podcast. Someone who every game you're getting a pretty damn good performance, but it's not outstanding, so it doesn't get celebrated that much. But Leeson Mau is a very, very, very good middle forward and very rarely plays a bad game.
Leeson Mau is, like you say, he's not the biggest dude. He does have very good footwork, but it's sort of relative for his position. It's not like Taumalolo level footwork, but very good footwork. He's certainly decent on his feet. And yeah, the king of just rolling into just hard to tackle. Like he's in that sort of, I think he's got a little bit of that Paul Gallen mold about him, where it's just like he's not huge, but he's just a ball of muscle. You can't chop him down, sort of thing. The way I look at it is Leeson Mau is a cannonball. Like he just rolls forward, not super fast, but just rolls forward consistently, and his game reflects that because he is just super reliable. And, I think he had 4 years at the Dragons. The first year he was outstanding in a sort of unexpected way because it was a bit of his breakout season. The second year he wasn't that great. He was just sort of back to average. Then he was very good the third year and outstanding again the fourth year. And you realize when he's gone just how much you miss those kind of meters. Just someone who can consistently, is never going to be chopped down. They've got this dude Blake Laurie for the Dragons at the moment playing. He won't be playing there anymore because they've signed what's the other Kafusi fella, but he'd been playing at lock for most of the season with slow feet, and he's just if you hit him he falls over. He's 0 post contact meters that I can remember through the entire season, whereas Leeson Mau is just a dude who he rolls forward maybe not even a cannonball, maybe a bowling ball, just continually rolling forward. And he is a really a dude who can fly under the radar, but he really is an enjoyable player to watch if you know to watch out for him, eh?
Very much so, just because you're how the fuck did he do that?
Just keeps on rolling.
I'm going to check your little Blake Laurie no post-contact meters
I mean, I don't mean literally zero.
No,
but he's not up for much. Yeah.
I'm very curious. So the Seagulls Dragons, Blake Lowry had 6 runs and he had 14 post-contact meters. I'm just trying to find a comparison here. There's not a whole lot of post-contact meters though in this Dragons team.
No, there's not really.
So that's but
maybe was Frizzell playing, because he's the only one really.
Yeah, so he had 13 runs. He had 13 runs and 40 post-contact meters. So
that's still more than 3 per, whereas Laurie's roughly in that 2 meters, 1 to 2 meter range, which is like, that's just you falling forward at that point, isn't it? Like, does that even count?
I'll keep an eye on it when I check my NRL stats. When I'll remind you in the next podcast. It's a fun little exercise. The Tongan team, who are renowned for their post-contact meters, some of the best post-contact meters numbers, other than Kema Malo, the greatest winger in the world at the moment. Tonga were a wee bit disappointing, but not. I've settled on a clear-cut idea that the easy option here is to blame John Asiata and Tuilola here, because Tonga were camped on the Kiwis try line. But for starters, the Kiwis defence was very good, and it's an international calibre defence, and I've raised a few ideas about how defence may be overrated with you, Wildcard. It is, but obviously defence does to a strong degree win you championships, and just for me it's more about the attitude. Like, if you have an attitude that you're going to be good defensively, it generally sets you in the right standing overall to win a game of footy. The Kiwis' defence was fantabulous on their try line, but that's strictly based on what they did themselves. They came out with an international caliber defense, and then to break down an international caliber defense, it's going to be very difficult for John Asiata and Tui Moala here to break that defense down. For starters, they had very good kicking games. I vividly remember Sean Johnson and Benji Marshall each had a kick early in this game that gave up a 7-tackle restart, which is the most terrible thing you can do against Tonga, because they get 7 tackles, they're going to end up on your 10-metre line, let alone scoring a try, because they can just roll downfield, and that's exactly what you don't want to do. And Tonga got in good field position. They were able to set up the tent and camp down the Kiwis' end from those 7-tackle sets. But it was the Kiwis' kicking game that conceded those 7-tackle sets. Whereas Asiata and Tuilola here, their kicking games were pretty damn good. Like John Asiata, left foot, right foot, however you want it. They were just chipping into the corners, forcing the Kiwis to come out their own end. So I think Asiata and Lola here, given the context, given the situation, did a good job. The major downfall for Tonga was the fact that they were just blown away through the middle. With the footy, without the footy, however you want it, the Kiwis did a good job containing them. Jason Taumalolo only had 7 metres per run, which is unheard of. Tavita Pangai, he had 16 runs for 126, so which is, I think the number was 7.8 metres per run. So the Kiwis did that. And then with the footy, they were able to roll downfield pretty damn easily themselves. So I think Tonga shouldn't be too concerned. Like, even if they have to roll out another game of Lola here and Asiata in the halves, first of all, they'll be better off for that experience together. But the Tongan forwards are going to show up with a completely different attitude and just understanding of what they have to do to win an international game of footy, because it was fairly underwhelming from that Tongan forward pack what they did against the Kiwis, and yeah, just disappointing. Just disappointing for Tonga that their biggest strength didn't really show up as such.
Yeah, I mean, that all seems pretty legit. I mean, I I was like, when they had that spell where they were just sort of attacking set after set, Kiwis defending on their goal line, it was really hard not to be like, well, if they just had a top shelf NRL half in there somewhere, then they would have surely found a way through, like broken that trial, get some points on the board, here we go, game on. But they didn't. However, like, we knew going into that game that their halves were, not bad. I mean, Tuilola Hare's got good NRL experience behind him, and where is he now? Must be Super League at this point. Had a couple bad years, but he's he is a proven quality at least a certain level. And John Asiata has played in the halves before. I remember him actually playing outstandingly there once against the Dragons, which was a bit embarrassing, but still, like, you knew what you were going to get from them at a certain, to a certain degree. It was the forward pack not doing what they were expected to do that was the real problem, I think. So, yeah, I don't know. Why was that? Like, do you think that's just the Kiwis muscling up and coming in with a better attitude? Tonga maybe getting a little bit, I don't know if complacent's the right word. Complacent is almost never the right word with professional sports. People say things like that because fans just get upset that they're feeling upset when their team doesn't do well, and they say, oh, these guys, they just don't care enough, which is almost certainly never true. But, like, I don't know, what was the difference there?
That's the thing. It's just how you show up on the day, and whether you're there to win a game of footy or if you're just a couple of things are off. Like, Siosua Tokiaho missed 6 tackles in the middle of the park, which I think on one of the Brandon Smith runs, he couldn't get a hold of Brandon Smith, and I love Tokiaho. He's one of my favourite players, and that doesn't happen for Tokiaho. He doesn't do that. And you had this situation where Tokiaho missed a whole heap of tackles but was pretty effective running the footy, and Jason Taumalolo, he made 31 tackles and missed 3, was pretty effective defensively, but was a non-factor by Jason Taumalolo standards with the footy. So it's just like no one could string together like a really good display other than maybe Adam Whenua-Blake. Tavita Pangai Jr. definitely didn't. And I think they started off the game in the right places, but a couple of Brandon Smith runs, so you realise that your ruck defence isn't up to standard pretty quickly because Brandon Smith can get out of dummy half anytime he likes, so you're watching that happen, and then you're literally watching Sean Johnson run around Tavita Pangai Jr. You mentioned John Asiata, who missed 6 tackles himself, but he was defending outside Pangai Jr., and Pangai Jr. either had Sean Johnson run around him, or Pangai Jr. just attempted a tackle and then fell off the tackle. Like, Sean Johnson and Jerome Hughes both got on the outside of Pangai Jr., but Pangai Jr. was there making a tackle, but those 2 little blokes still found their way to the try line. And if you're watching a Kiwis team just come down your end of the field, score points, you can't score points, mentally I think it just forces you to just, fuck this. You just have to switch off. Like, you'd have to be a mental safe to be able to withstand watching a Kiwis team do whatever they want with you, defensively and with the footy as well, to then stay in the contest. It's just very difficult to do. So I think what happened in the game had a huge impact on how Tonga dealt with that kind of second half of the first half onwards, because Pangai Jr. had a nightmare. He was incredibly exposed as an edge forward. It was kind of worrisome for his edge forward career, and I can only really assume that he'll be targeted if he's ever there again by the Kiwis. And then just a combination of different players who weren't able to string together a comprehensive, solid display. Because Taumalolo and Tokiaho, as much as I love them, were very good in one aspect and not good in the other aspect.
Yeah, and I guess this is how the score goes from 6-4 to 34-4 and then a couple tries at the end. But it wasn't really reflective necessarily of the difference between the two teams overall, but I think it was reflective of the difference on the day, Because, I think what you said is probably true. Like, when you're just getting dudes like scooting out and around you, like, how are you supposed to keep making those tackles when the guy next to you was missing them, kind of thing? Like, it is demoralizing, isn't it? And, like, yeah, I mean, disappointing is the obvious word, because Tonga weren't where we sort of thought they might be, and the test match ended up not being as close as it could have been. But yeah, it's always tricky to pick apart the pieces afterwards and say, like, well, was this disappointing because they were mud, or was it disappointing because the other lot were real good, and balancing the ledgers there. But
yeah, you can only really view it in just it is what it was. The Kiwis won 34-14.
Yeah.
That was completely fair. That was just how the game went. But if you're Tonga, I wrote about this morning. It's a key thing for Tonga to understand is they have to go through these experiences, because it's irresponsible for anyone to think that Tonga are just going to cruise on a certain trajectory. Not at international football. That's not what happens. You're going to have such as international football that New Zealand, Australia, England are not going to just let you come into tier one, that's not going to happen. They have a certain level of pride that all these nations play for, and the thing here is that all these other nations are tier one nations because they have a certain level of depth, and Tonga have to go through these situations where their depth is tested. Their depth is, how they say the process of working out is that you break down the muscle and then all the good stuff happens in the recovery of that muscle. That's how the muscle builds back stronger, gets bigger, whatever it is. Tonga have to have their depth tested and then recover and then build upon that depth. You had John Asiata make his debut, Manase Fainu made his debut, Satili Tuponuia, fantastic Roosters forward, he made his debut. So 3 players made their debut. That's 3 players that can add to Tonga's depth. I continue to talk about Moeaki Fotuaika, who was fantastic for the Gold Coast Titans every week. I've got him as the best middle forward prospect in the whole competition, and he wasn't in this team. He'll come back. Michael Jennings is in the mix. You've got other Tongan forwards like Ofahiki Ogden. He's a Mangere East junior playing with the Bulldogs. Taniela Paseka is a man mountain. He's bigger than any of the Tongan forwards in the forward pack right now. He's playing for Manly Seagulls. Andrew Fafita wasn't in this team. There's pieces that are going to help Tonga build through this process, and I think Tonga have to reflect on this in the same way that the Kiwis reflected on it, but it's 2 very different journeys that they are on. Tonga are on the journey of establishing themselves at this level. They had the high water marker. Now it's about establishing themselves at that high water mark, and that's going to be a tough process to do, because you got to get players playing international footy. You got to be playing consistent games against tough opposition, so you're going to lose games. That's going to happen. Whereas the Kiwis are good vibes. Everyone's just building together. They know what it takes to perform at this level. They have the depth to endure those up and downs. So it's 2 different journeys, but Tonga, I think, given how everyone loves the support, everyone loves the occasion, everyone loves the game, a lot of people can view Tonga in isolation from game by game. Tonga are on a journey to the next World Cup, where they are trying to establish themselves as one of the best teams in the world prior to that World Cup. And that's a journey, that's a process that Tonga have to go on. You're going to have many more moments like this, but it's about getting a solid group of Tongan players together, getting the best group of Tongan players that's on offer, and just playing footy, establishing combinations, because everything about Tonga's success was built around having a spine of Will Hopoate, Ata Hingano, Tuilolahia, Saliva Havili, and Sione Katoa. Manase Fainu is 10 times better than Sione Katoa, but he's making his debut. And then you've got John Asiata in the halves instead of Ata Hingano, so the combinations are a bit skewed as well. So for Tonga, it's equally as much about the journey as the Kiwis, and that's just a key point to remember.
Lovely. What else we got? Is there anything else on the old agenda here?
Shout out to the Kiwi Ferns. They defeated Samoa
Yes.
fairly comprehensively. Standout player for Samoa was Louisa Gago, who plays for the Warriors women's team. Kiwis unearthed a player called Shante Poko, who looks like an absolute freak. She's pretty big, and she's throwing like 20-meter cutout passes. She's got all the skills. She's kicking goals. Shante Poko I think she played Canterbury Rugby Union in the Farah Palmer Cup as recently as 2017. She was amazing for the Kiwi Ferns. You had a couple of other standouts for the new faces for the Kiwi Ferns as well. Amber Paris Hall had made her debut a couple of years ago, but this year she's just got a contract with the Brisbane Broncos women's team, and she was also emphatic in the Kiwi Ferns middle, which is part of I've just started the women's NRL signing tracker. So off the top of my head, Nita Maynard she has been signed by the Roosters. She came off the bench for the Kiwi Ferns. I'll just pull this up for you, Wildcard. How about that? We'll finish there. The Broncos they had a massive contingent last year. They haven't re-signed too many. They got Amber Paris Hall from the Richmond Roses and Rona Peters, who is based out of Queensland. She played Queensland State of Origin. Nita Maynard with the Sydney Roosters has been playing for the North Sydney Bears in Sydney, and the St George Illawarra Dragons have Bataille Vete Welsh, who actually played for New South Wales, and she has to decide whether she's going to play for Australia or Aotearoa. She's up from a bit further north than you are right now, Wildcard. She's from Taipa in the naughty north, way up north, further than Whangarei. So only 4 players have been signed, but we do not have any Warriors contracts, and there'll be a few more, I suspect, for the Broncos, Roosters, and Dragons as well.
Well, brilliant. There we go. There's the full-on lowdown there, Doc.
It's pretty quick. There's only 4 players, so with the women's
4
signings.
and counting, hopefully.
4 and definitely counting. I suspect we'll be back after the Black Caps. When do they play Wildcard? Overnight Wednesday, I think.
Christ, yeah. I think it's Wednesday night.
Wednesday night they take on Pakistan. Pakistan, who just absolutely fucked over South Africa. So that'll be an interesting game. We'll come back after that one. Then we'll have another Rugby League episode later in the week. What's on your agenda this week, Wildcard?
Ooh, let me think about that for a second. Bit of Flying Kiwis, probably some more Football Ferns fallout. I'm not sure if the Phoenix are going to be announcing another signing anytime soon, but that's always a possibility. The quotable Stephen Adams has been in the works for a while. I would have published it last week, but I thought after the whole Tall Blacks thing, and maybe it wasn't the best time PR-wise. Just let that one simmer for a week. That'll be out soon. And probably got to write about his whole trade situation as well, coming up sometime in the immediacy. So that ought to keep me busy, I think.
And if Stephen Adams is traded anytime soon, we'll be fairly soon after that. We'll have to do a podcast if that does ever eventuate.
Yes, I believe that would be a necessity.
Shout out to you for listening to the Nichecast. Big cheers. Enjoy the start of your week, and we'll see you probably on Thursday or Friday. Ka kite.